Hey, what's going on? I'm Matt O'Leary back with another video, and today's video is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a decade recap. So I'm going to give you my team of the decade, go position by position. I'll do quarterbacks, running backs, offensive linemen, defensive side of the ball. I'm not going to do special teams or anything like that, but I'm going to give you a starting 11 and a starting 11 on both the offense and defensive side of the balls of the best Jets players of the decade. But before we get started, I just wanted to mention that you can follow me on social media at Matt O'Leary NY on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe for more New York Jets content. So now that we got that out of the way, let's hop right into it, and we'll start with the quarterback position. And to me, the guy of the decade was Sam Darnold. Now I know it's a very limited sample size, but from what we've seen from a talent perspective, basing this pure on talent, he is the most talented one by far. Ryan Fitzpatrick had a great 2015 season, set records for the New York Jets in 2015, but that was 1 year. It was a flash in the pan, and the 2016 season was a complete regression, and we cannot give it to him because of that. Also, Mark Sanchez's best years was in 2009 and 2010. 2011 was okay for him, and then he really regressed in 2012 before getting hurt. I'm not giving it to Geno Smith or Michael Vick. I'm not giving it to Bryce Petty or Greg McElroy or Josh McCown or pick any other quarterback who has suited up for the New York Jets over the last decade. There's been plenty tough ones to watch, but Sam Darnold to me is the most talented. Yes, he put up just 3,000 yards passing. He's only played 13 games, but to me, he is the most talented, and I'm going with him for the quarterback of the decade. For running back, I'm going to go with Chris Ivory. As much as I wanted to go with Bilal Powell, if you guys are familiar with my channel and been here a lot, you know how much I love Bilal Powell, but he just was never really a feature back. Yes, in 2016 and 17, he put up specifically really good seasons, but Ivory was probably the most consistent in 13, 14, and 15. He was here for a 3-year window. He had over 800 yards in each of those years. He was really solid for the Jets, specifically in 2015 when he went over 1,000 rushing yards. He was probably the best feature back. I say this because in 2010, you had LaDainian Tomlinson and Sean Green, and then in 2011, that kind of flipped. It was more on Sean Green, and LT kind of took a step back. I'm not going to give it to either of those two guys. I'm not going to give it to the Matt Fortes. I'm not going to give it to the Isaiah Crowells of the world or the Joe McKnights, RIP. But to me, Chris Ivory is the most consistent. So for me, he has to be the number one running back of the decade for the New York Jets. At wide receiver, there's not a whole lot to work with. The Jets aren't exactly known for their skill positions, but there were some pretty good years. I'll start with Robbie Anderson, who has been really involved in this offense a lot since the 2017 season. He went over 900 receiving yards. Then the last 2 years, he was in the 700 range, but he has been the Jets' main wide receiver target. And even though his production never went above 1,000 yards, or really over 950 yards receiving, he still was probably one of the better wide receivers the New York Jets have had over this time. And I'm going to give you two more because I'll use a 3 wide receiver set. I'm not using a fullback, sorry, or 2 tight ends. It's just going to be the 3 wide receivers. So he's definitely one of them. Another has to be Eric Decker. To me, he was someone who was brought in here in 2014 and in a really bad offense was able to put up some decent numbers. I believe he had over 900 receiving yards. The next year in 2015, he had huge numbers with Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback, which leads me to my 3rd wide receiver, which would be Brandon Marshall. That would be my trio: Marshall, Decker, and Anderson. Marshall obviously was traded for. The Jets brought him in before the 2015 season. He had a phenomenal year, over 1,400 receiving yards, double-digit touchdowns. Yes, that took a significant step back in 2016. The whole team checked out. I understand that. But when you're looking at the Jets wide receivers, there's not a whole lot to choose from. I'm not putting Jeremy Curley on this list. I'm not putting Devin Smith on this list. A bust, obviously. And then from the early years, you only had Kotri on the team for 2010. You only had Braylon Edwards for 2010 and then a small stint in 2012. I couldn't give it to Santonio Holmes. And then after that, I mean, who else are you going to really give it to? To me, those are the 3 that make the most sense. At left tackle, he was a mainstay. D'Brickashaw Ferguson. Who else are you going to give it to? He was rock solid for the New York Jets from 2006 through the 2015 season. Unfortunately, it was a rather short career for him, but he is a Ring of Honor type of guy, and who else are you going to give it to? I'm not giving it to Calvin Beachum, even though he's been okay, but other than that, to me, it's got to be D'Brickashaw Ferguson. At left guard, I'm going with James Carpenter. He was here with the Jets from 2015 through 2018. He was pretty solid. He was probably the most solid left guard that they had over that time. I'm not giving it to Alex Lewis. I just can't do it. There's not a whole lot of other positive choices to go in here. So to me, Carpenter makes the most sense. At center, who other than Nick Mangold? I mean, he was here through the 2016 season, drafted in 2006, like D'Brickashaw Ferguson, and the Jets have really struggled trying to replace him. Wesley Johnson after that, disaster. Spencer Long could not snap the football. They brought Ryan Khalil out of retirement, that was a disaster, and Jonathan Harrison, has been very mediocre to below average. So it's got to be Nick Mangold. He's going to be a Jets Ring of Honor guy as well. At right guard, I'm going early in the decade. Brandon Moore, he was on the Jets for what felt like forever, and he was rock solid. Yeah, he only played a few years, I believe 3 years into this decade with the New York Jets, but nonetheless, he was a mainstay on that offensive line, and part of the reason why they went to the AFC Championship game in the 2010 season, and why in 2011 they were very close to making the playoffs. They really haven't came all that close until 2015, obviously. But to me, he's the obvious choice there. Unfortunately for the Jets, it wasn't a great year of offensive line, so Moore is going to be my right guard. Speaking of poor choices for offensive line, on the right tackle, I think you got to go Brandon Shell, which is a sad sight because you're not going Ben Ajalana, you're not going Breno Giacomini. You just can't. There aren't a ton of solid options. Damian Woody was only here for a year, maybe 2 years of the decade. I think you got to give it to Shell. I don't love giving it to him, but when you look at the options, who else are you going to give it to? Moving over to the defense now, I'm going to do a base 3-4 defense. I'm going to have 2 defensive ends, a defensive tackle, 2 middle linebackers, 2 outside linebackers. You know the drill. A base 3-4 defense. So my 2 defensive ends, I'm going to start first with Muhammad Wilkerson. I know it ended poorly for the Jets after he signed that massive contract after the 2015 season. He did not live up to it, but he posted a couple double-digit sack years, and he was pretty solid. He was maybe the best of the bunch of that was drafted at that time. I'm going to say probably Sheldon Richardson, who's going to be my other defensive end. But nonetheless, Muhammad Wilkerson was effective for this team from 2011 through the 2015 season. That's a 5-year run. Got to give it to him. And then Sheldon Richardson for my other defensive end because, one, I'm not going to give it to Leonard Williams. And maybe I'll use him for a defensive tackle. Spoiler alert, I'm not going to. But I'm going to use Sheldon Richardson because of his 2013 season. He won the Defensive Rookie of the Year award. And then in 2014, he was the best player on that team by a mile. That team gave up, and they were awful defensively. If you look at the numbers, they were brutal in 2014 defensively. But he continued to play hard the remainder of that year, and I give him a lot of credit for that. Yes, in 2015, things kind of derailed. He also was part of the reason why the Jets were able to trade up for Sam Darnold, so that gives him points with me as well. But if you look at what he did those first 2 years, gotta like what he did. Off the field, I get it. He's a jerk. He's not the best. He made some poor decisions. But for on-the-field talent, you can't deny what he was for this Jets team. And then let's be honest, Todd Bowles did not use him correctly in 2015. He really didn't. He used him as a linebacker. He's a big boy. He can't play linebacker. At defensive tackle, I'm going with the run-stopping Damon Harrison. He was really solid for the Jets. That was a good find, and he was a really big piece of that interior defensive line. In 2015, the Jets, yes, everyone remembers how good their offense was, and I miss watching a fun offense like that. But defensively, they were really solid, and part of the reason was because of Damon Harrison. He was able to clog up the middle, and to me, I mean, he's the number one choice. Could I have went with a Sione Puha? Maybe. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. Or even Steve McClendon's been pretty solid as a defensive tackle. I couldn't put it in my heart to put Leonard Williams in this. I just couldn't. He had one good year in 2016, and then 17, 18, and 19 wasn't really, he underwhelmed for me. So I'm putting Damon Harrison as my defensive tackle. At outside linebacker, I'm going to give you 2 guys. One, Calvin Pace, who did it forever. He was the edge setter for this team forever. Not a big sack guy, but as we know, the Jets haven't had a big sack guy coming off the edge since John Abraham left, which is now 2005. So it's been a very, very long time. Calvin Pace, though, was just a real rock-solid linebacker. And the other outside linebacker that I'm going to use for this decade, Jordan Jenkins, drafted in the third round of 2016. He's been a solid find, kind of like Calvin Pace light. He led the team in sacks this year with 8. I don't think he's going to get over that 10-sack plateau. I would really be surprised if he did, but he's going to be someone who can set the edge. And he's a player. He's a second contract guy. He should get re-signed. So for me, my two outside linebackers are going to be Calvin Pace and Jordan Jenkins. On the inside linebacker, there was two obvious choices for me. The first, David Harris, another Ring of Honor guy, drafted by Eric Mangini, spoiler alert. He was very solid for this team for a long time. He played through the 2016 season, kind of started to fall off a little bit in 2015 as he got older, but he was very good on this team. Over 100 tackles multiple times. He is someone that will be remembered of this decade. Unfortunately, it didn't end all that great as he began to fall off in 15-16. Injuries got to him a little bit, but he was a very solid inside linebacker for a long time. His running mate, Bart Scott, I'm going to put in there as well. He was brought in for the 2009 season, and he was here for a few years into the decade as well. Put up really good numbers in 2010, 2011. Started to fall off a little bit after that, but, I mean, for inside linebacker, I couldn't give it to Avery Williamson. He only played that one good year. CJ Mosley played one game. Not going to give it to him either. Maybe I could have went with Demario Davis, but his stint was too short, and the first one wasn't really all that great. So to me, Bart Scott was the obvious choice here for my other inside linebacker. On the outside at cornerback, I have two choices for you as well. My first is going to be Darrelle Revis. First stint Revis. So obviously 2009 was the year that everyone remembers. He was very good in 2010. He was very good in 11, and I know he got hurt in 2012, but he was extremely solid then. He came back in 2015, gave you about a half a season where he was very productive. Back half of the schedule, didn't do anything against teams like the Texans, didn't do anything against Buffalo week 17, and then mailed it in 2016. So he left a sour taste in Jets fans' mouths. But when you think about the cornerback position in the New York Jets, it's Darrelle Revis. He has to be on this list. He is definitely my cornerback one. Opposite of him is his longtime running mate. I got to go with Antonio Cromartie. He was here from 2010 through the 2013 season, and then he went away for 1 year, came back in 2015 with Darrelle Revis. Wasn't as good the second time around, but he really developed into a solid second corner with Darrelle Revis. He was very good. He wasn't elite, but he was a very good cornerback that the Jets could use right now, actually, because they kind of struggle at that position. At strong safety, this is an obvious choice. You got to go with Jamal Adams. He was drafted 6th overall in 2017. Had a pretty good rookie year, but the last 2 years, he's played at an all-pro level for safeties. He was a second-team all-pro, if I'm not mistaken, last year. This year, he's probably deserving of it. He's going to be in the Pro Bowl, I would imagine. He is a very solid guy. And to me, that's the obvious choice for strong safety. Maybe could have went Jim Leonard, but to me, Adams is the much more talented player as he could do everything. He can cover, he can tackle, he can come up and stop the run, he could rush the passer. He does it all on the defense. And for me, strong safety has to be Jamal Adams. Free safety, I'm going to go with his running mate, Marcus May. He surprised me this year. He stayed healthy. He was really solid. He wasn't healthy last year, but he graded out really well by Pro Football Focus. And I thought in his rookie year in 2017, he actually had a better rookie year than Jamal Adams in my mind. And to me, I couldn't really find anyone else who I thought was deserving of the free safety role. So if I'm going position by position, that's exactly it. Let me know what you think. Get down below in the comments and tell me what your decade team would look like. It's kind of sad that this decade only saw one playoff appearance, but hopefully things are changing in the 20s. I don't count on it just yet, but hopefully things begin to change rather soon. Let me know what you thought of the video down below. You can get at me on social media at Matt O'Leary NY. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'll talk to you next time.